Hey everybody, thank you for joining our third episode today to celebrate Girl Scouts Love State Parks weekend. I'm Melissa Yapel and I'm in the car right now, which you can probably tell, but nothing was going to stop me from celebrating this weekend with you Girl Scouts. So I hope you are excited as I am to hear from Jenny Richards, our naturalist at Shawnee State Park, about edible plants. So if you've been with us on any of our other programs, you know that we love to say hello to you, your name and where you're from in the Q&A. And if you have any questions, type that in the Q&A too, and we will see if Jenny can answer them throughout the show. But let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to pass it to Jenny now. You're live, Jenny.
All right. Hello, everybody. I don't know if the girls can see me out there or anybody else who tuned in, but I have a really awesome program set up for you today about wild edibles. And I just wanted to share a tiny little bit about myself first. I was raised right here in Shawnee Forest, which is the largest state forest in all of Ohio. It's 64,000 acres. So I was raised kind of in the wild, and I've always enjoyed spending my time outside and looking for fun things to do. And one of the things that always enticed me was going out and eating berries and picking up nuts and eating nuts. So I wanted to share some of that with you. And over the past 20 years, I've been working at Shawnee, and I've also created my own wild edible yardscape. So I'm planting all kinds of great plants right here in my yard that I can eat. So that's really cool. Okay. So we'll start off today with a little bit about the past, the present, and ethical harvesting, aquatic animals, land animals, roots, sprouts, and leaves, fruits, nuts, and berries, and then some mushrooms. And there's a funny little thing here. This mushroom that is pictured there is an icon that I found, and that's an amanita. That's not an edible mushroom in that picture, but that's just a little picture of a mushroom. So a long time ago, a lot of people used the wild to eat. So they hunted and they gathered, and it was a need. People needed to live off the land before grocery stores and before cultivating of the land and planting crops. And now it's kind of become a thing of the past, our connection with plants and animals in the landscape. Because today we have grocery stores, and it's easy for us to go out and shop for ourselves. But it became popular again, I think around the 70s, to go out and hunt and gather and learn more about the plants and animals that existed in your landscape. So it's fun to do, and it can be used for survival if you're out backpacking or camping and you were to get lost. And if you know the plants and the animals and you have a connection with the land, you can use it to survive. And it can also be done as a really fun thing in your own backyard. So there's several things that are really important about wild edibles, and that is our ethics. We need to remember that the plants and animals in the landscape are the grocery store for themselves. I mean, the bees need the pollen, and the turkeys eat the acorns, and so do the deer. And so all of the plants and animals that are out there are necessary. We need them out there. So the best thing we can do if we're interested in this sort of thing is plant a wild edible paradise in our own backyard, which is so much fun. Using native plants in your yard that produce fruits, nuts, berries, seeds that you can eat is just a blast, because it brings in butterflies and birds and all of the other things that love to eat those same berries and fruits and nuts that we love to eat. So it really enhances the biodiversity in your yard, which is just wonderful. If you were not harvesting in your own backyard, maybe you're harvesting at your grandparents' or your brothers or sisters because you don't have enough space to harvest or to make a wild edible paradise. You want to really make sure that you check on the status of the plants that you intend to harvest, which means you have to find out if the plant is rare. You would never want to take a plant from the wild that was becoming a rare plant, and that has happened unfortunately, all across the United States and everywhere, people are harvesting and over harvesting and not harvesting at the right time. And so there's a resource that you can use. It's the USDA's plant website. You can go to that and it shows you where the plants grow and their status, whether they're rare, endangered, or very common. So that's a really important thing to do before you go out to harvest. And then if you intended to harvest in, say you wanted to pick up nuts on the ground under a walnut tree in a park, you would have to check on the rules and regulations before you did something like that. And if you were going to do it on private land that wasn't your private land, you'd want to make sure you got permission from the landowner. So I know only around 5% of all of the land in Ohio is public land. The rest is owned by the people, although our public land is also ours to enjoy. But there are rules and regulations, and we have to follow those because long ago, many of the animals were over harvested and then became extirpated or completely gone from the landscape. So it's super, super important that we make sure that we are following the rules and regulations because they're there for a reason. And another really important thing is only take what you can consume. In parks, you're allowed to take mushrooms, you're allowed to harvest mushrooms, but you're not allowed to harvest more mushrooms than you can consume. There's other people who want to see them. There's animals, turtles love mushrooms. So you want to make sure that you're, not taking more than you should. I've noticed over the last 20 years of being a naturalist in parks that there used to be a lot of these beautiful mushrooms growing on the hemlock trees that are very medicinal, and now they're just being taken like crazy and there's hardly any left. They're called the shellac mushroom, the hemlock shellac mushroom. They're so beautiful, but they're super medicinal. So people just take too much. So that's why it's important that we make sure that we harvest on our own land or a friend's land and they say that's okay. Another thing is never harvest in a place where people have been spraying poisons or fertilizing because that can make you sick as well. I'm not sure if you guys are hearing me because I can't hear me or see me and I don't see any other thing going on. So I'm hoping that someone out there is really truly receiving this presentation because I just
fine, Jenny. We
can
see and hear you just fine.
Okay, perfect.
Questions.
All right. I'm going to keep going. Animals. So we're almost done with the words, girls, and who else is out there? We're almost done with words. Soon we'll just be to pictures. But I wanted to make sure these are really, really important things. And the reason that I started doing wild edible programs in our park in Shawnee is because I noticed that things were being depleted from the landscape, and root digging is really popular here and in other places. So I wanted to make sure that I taught people the rules and help them think about that there are more people and animals out there that need all of this stuff than just ourselves. We need to be thoughtful of that. So if we're going to take animals from the wild, we have to follow the Division of Wildlife's rules and regulations, and you can find those right online. It's so easy. There's a couple of links right here. I know that's a lot, but you can click on the link and it'll take you right to the rules and regulations for fishing and for hunting. So that's pretty cool. You can easily find what you need to find right online. It's the World Wide Web, the spider web of information. So I wanted to start with aquatic animals. There's something, almost every park has fishing tournaments and we teach kids to fish. We also have passport to fishing programs. So that's something that comes up right away. We know we can catch fish from ponds and lakes and rivers. And so that's a really fun thing and a good way to start like eating something from the wild. And we also have to remember that fish have feelings. So if we're going to harvest the to kill and clean them. So we want to really use our hearts when we're doing all of this stuff. These little boys here are at a creek crawl, which happens in most of our parks. Almost all the naturalists love to take kids to the creek and look for little macroinvertebrates, which are insects starting their life cycle in the stream. Although you can't eat the little macroinvertebrates, you can eat some of the things like crayfish. And you can buy crayfish in the store, and it's really popular down in the South. Louisiana makes crayfish, and it's really delicious. Actually, my dad sent my brother and I when we were kids to the creek and sent us with a 5-gallon bucket, and he said, get the crayfish, bring them home, and I'll make you a your crayfish dish, and we did, and it was so exciting. That was the only time I ever did that myself. But there are rules to that too. You can never have more than 100. And I actually am not a fan of taking anything from the wild that I'm not going to eat. And I just think we should really be thoughtful and mindful of anything like that. If there's an invasive crayfish called the rusty crayfish, try to eat those instead of the beautiful, this one's called a painted claw crayfish right here that I probably would not take that from the wild. And again, you have to check and make sure that things are not rare before you take them for yourself. We don't want to deplete our landscape of its beautiful biodiversity, because it's just so awesome that we have all these animals in our landscape. I don't know if you've ever had frog legs, but I sure have. And that picture there is a green frog. And green frogs, I lied, it's a bullfrog. Green frogs and bullfrogs are edible and can be taken with a valid fishing license, and you eat the legs. My brother and my dad and I used to go frog gigging when I was a kid in the backwaters of the Ohio River, and we would eat frog legs, and it was just a part of my life. So I'm very connected to the land and the things that I consume, and you'll see that as this program goes on and on. So frog legs, you can tell a green frog from a bullfrog by the line that drops behind the big circle behind the eye. That's called the tympanic membrane. That's his eardrum, basically. And a bullfrog has a big fold that drops down behind the eardrum, where a green frog's fold goes right down the back. So that's just a fun little ID tip. Both are edible. Okay, I know this is a touchy subject, eating animals, but if you do eat meat, someone else is killing your meat and feeding it to you. Harvesting from your own land or from a friend's land is really neat. So game animals, that a lot of people like deer meat. I like deer meat, and I have never killed a deer myself, but we do offer archery programs in almost all the parks, which teach you how to shoot bows and arrows. And that would be the first thing you would want to do if you were going to try to harvest any animal, is to make sure that you knew how to do it right, that you could make a clean kill, so that you didn't have anybody out there suffering. So this young lady, Abby, is learning to shoot, and I have many young kids who volunteer in the Nature Center who have actually killed their own deer and field dressed them and made deer jerky and deer steaks and eating the wild animals. Now these are game birds. All of these birds that we're showing are actually game birds, which means you can harvest them during their season. So there's a season for wild ducks out there. Not all ducks are harvestable. Some are very rare. Season for turkeys. And a lot of people, especially around here in this giant forest, love to hunt birds. These little guys on the left, I cannot imagine ever shooting one of these. This is a timberdoodle or a woodcock, and I think they're in decline, but there still is a hunting season for them. And the Division of Wildlife is making sure that they're following up on, population densities and stuff. And if it ever does become too rare to hunt, they'll take it off the hunt list. But look at this beautiful little bird, and she's got her babies all around her. It's a ground nester, and so is the wild turkey, and so is a duck. So those are some animals we could harvest, and there's many more, and I'm sure you can think of some of them while you're sitting there right now, some of the other animals that can be harvested from the wild. I'm more of a plant, nut, seed, berry gatherer myself.
Hey, Jenny.
Oh, yes.
So you were recently talking about the frog legs, and we have Reagan who wrote in and said, what do you do with the rest of the leftover frog after eating its legs?
Well, if I were going to be eating frog legs, I would probably make a stock, like a fish stock, out of the rest of and add that stock to my food, or I would feed that to another animal. For me, I'm all about no waste. I find roadkill, I pick it up, I feed it to my snakes here. All my compost that I have goes in the backyard and turns to dirt. Any foodstuffs that I don't eat, my chickens eat. So I'm really into conservation. It is my heart and soul. It's everything about me is about conservation. So I wish that everyone would prize every part. And I'm so happy this little person, Reagan, asked me this question because it is so important. I think we should all make sure that we're not throwing food in the trash. And meat was once a living animal. We should all remember that and take that to heart. Never throw meat in the trash. Bring your leftovers home in a Tupperware that you took to the restaurant, and let's all try to waste less. Yes, I could go on and on forever about, conservation. It's like I said, it's my heart and soul. So we'll go on to some plants. Roots, sprouts, leaves, flowers, and seeds. And this is one that's really important to know the 3 R's, the right plant, the right part, and the right time of year. So what we want to do is eat the plant where the sunshine is. So in the spring, all of the sun is filling the leaves with its love. So we're going to eat leaves usually, and sprouts in the spring. And in the summer, we may be eating berries because all the sun's love is going to the berries. And in the fall, it's usually the roots and the seeds and the nuts that we're going to eat. So, and I have great resources to share with you at the end of how you can figure out what to eat and when to eat and how to be safe and careful and cautious. We'll just keep going with this. We'll start with one of my favorite early spring trees. It's a redbud, and I'm certain you've been driving along a highway sometime and seen dogwoods and redbuds in May blooming, and they're just gorgeous, and the flowers are not red at all. I don't know how it got its name redbud because it should be called the purple bud or the fuchsia bud. And you can collect the flowers and sprinkle those on a salad, and I don't know how you could over-harvest those. I have redbuds all over the yard. All the pictures of plants that are in this presentation are from my yard. So I want to just share with you that, I've got this thing, and you probably already have plants in your yard that are edible and you just don't know yet. So you can learn and become intimate with the plants and animals in your yard and see what it is you could try to harvest. But can you see me in this? Are you guys seeing me right now?
Yep, we see you.
Okay, well, this is something that I created. I used to just eat red bud flowers, but this year I made a red bud vinegar. So I took the flower buds before they opened and I put them in rice wine vinegar and I let them steep for a couple of days, and then I strained it and I got this beautiful purple vinegar, and I can use it for vinaigrettes. And it's going to have a wonderful flowery flavor of red bud. So I'm going to be showing you things along the way that I've actually made of the plants in my yard. And I'm just skimming the surface. There are thousands of plants that you can eat in the wild. So I'm just going to show you about 30 of them. There's so many more. Daylilies. Okay, I love eating invasive species. I'm the first to admit, if you can't beat the invasives, you gotta eat them. And daylilies are not native to North America, but they grow all along the roadsides and they have so many edible parts. You can put the petals in your salad and they have a nice little peppery flavor. You can eat the shoots and they taste a little bit like a cucumber. You can eat the roots, they call them tubers, and they're like a little boiled potato. You can boil them and eat them. And then the buds, which you see down on the bottom right, are edible. You can eat them raw. You can pickle them, which I did. I'll show you my pickled daylily buds. Now, one of the reasons that I do all this preserving stuff is because I host a wild edible weekend in Shawnee State Park every other year, and we have a huge meal, a wonderful meal. And so I start doing this year round whenever I can find things and preserve them. And since I do the weekend in September, I'm not able to feed people. I could feed them the tubers, but I love the buds. So I pickled these buds and I just used a little vinegar, a little bit of sugar, and some water, and I pickled the buds and I keep them in the refrigerator, and they're crispy and delicious. You would love them. And I hope that after this program, every one of you will come join me at Shawnee State Park for one of my wild edible walks, because I do those regularly too. Now, this is an awesome plant that grows native in Ohio. It grows in the sandy areas of Ohio, and there's some of those in the northern part of our state, and down here along the Ohio River is a beautiful place called Sandy Springs. It's very sandy, and prickly pear, cactus, grows in Sandy Springs. A friend of mine lives in that area, and he had some prickly pear in his yard, and I said, oh, please, can I have one start of that? And I brought it home, stuck it in an old broke down wheelbarrow, and it's spreading like crazy. You can eat the fruit of the prickly pear. You can grind up the seeds of the fruit and make like a flour. And you can also eat the pads. If you go to a gourmet restaurant, a lot of times you'll find prickly pear pads. So you have to use gloves harvesting. Some of these things you have to use gloves harvesting because these are pokey and prickly. So you'd want to be careful about it. But prickly pear has many edible parts. And wouldn't you love to see that flower blooming in your yard? It's the most gorgeous thing ever. I can't even stand it. I just stare at it when it's in bloom. Okay, this is evening primrose. This is just grows in waste places and all over the place. It's got beautiful yellow flowers. And earlier I was saying in the spring we can usually harvest leaves and eat leaves, but as the time goes on, the sun changes its focus and starts putting its focus into flowers or something like that. But you can eat leaves of evening primrose in the spring, and you can eat the roots in the late fall or winter. Which this is a plant that I've never tried. I keep hearing people say, have you tried evening primrose? I have never tried it, but I knew there's a lot of plants out there you can eat that I haven't tried. I just want to see them blooming and see the insects going to them. But I do like trying new things, and I've just recently tried a new mushroom that I'm going to share with you in this presentation. But I do have primrose growing all around the edges of my perimeter of the land here and along the vernal pool edge. So I might try that this winter. I might try the roots of that. Chicory. Now, I doubt if any of you girls drink coffee, but down in Louisiana, you can get a chicory coffee substitute. And this is not native either. So you take the roots of this, dry them, and grind them, and they have the flavor of coffee. I don't know if you can find the beautiful, beautiful pollinator in the image, but right in the middle, if you look back, you'll see a hummingbird clearwing moth pollinating the chicory. So that's another great thing about having chicory in the edges of your perimeter of your property, is that you get all these wonderful little butterflies and moths coming to it. And look at the color of that. It is so beautiful. But I've never tried grinding the roots of this myself, but I did buy the coffee substitute, the chicory coffee. I found it online and I bought it so that for our tea and jelly bar Sunday morning at the end of the Wild Edible Weekend, I could feed or let people try chicory coffee. So that's another thing you can. Jerusalem artichoke. Now, it's not an artichoke at all. You eat the roots of this. This is a beautiful composite. The composite is a flower that has ray flowers and disc flowers. So there's flowers in the middle and flowers on the outside. And it looks like a sunflower. There's lots of these beautiful composite flowers. Actually, it's the most diverse group of flowers, I believe, besides orchids, or they're close to each other. So this is beautiful. It's all around my property. It spreads like crazy. And you can eat the roots of this in late fall. I hear it's better to let it even go into the winter before you pull up the plant and eat the roots, because it can cause a little bit of belly. Well, it can cause you to make sounds. You know, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying there, but if you wait till after it frosts, it doesn't upset your belly. But I also have not tried Jerusalem artichoke, but I have a friend who's eaten it, says it's delicious. I see Jenna now. All right, this is another beautiful plant that has multiple uses, touch me not. And this is one of the varieties. There's two varieties that grow here. One is pale touch me not, and the other in the picture, the image of me and the small children, is the common touch me not that's all over. And the seeds are ballistic, so they blow up when you touch them. And if you catch the seeds, they taste like little hickory nuts. But in the spring, I've read that you can also eat the shoots and the leaves. Have not tried that myself. I've only eaten the little explosive seed pods, and there's a video coming up that you can see the seeds exploding. So that's what's next. But I also wanted to say this plant is great for helping prevent poison ivy. The stalk is really, really gooey and wet and gelatinous. So if you open it up and spread it onto your itchies, it'll stop itchies. It's found in most soaps that are poison ivy soaps. So that's just a really neat thing. Now get ready for a cute little video. Let's see if it'll work. I'll play.
Okay, I've done it. I found a completely ripe seed pod from the pale touch-me-not. And if you look at the seed pod, you can actually see that the seeds inside are brown, and when I reach out and touch that, it is going to explode, and that is how the seeds are distributed. And if I can catch the seeds,
I do that every time.
But if you can catch the seeds, they're edible. They taste like little hickory nuts. So this one, maybe I can wrap my hand around the back side of it, and it blew up in my hand. And then there's the little seeds. This one's green, and they're edible.
Although you lose weight eating seeds like that, right? Those are so tiny. It takes a lot of work. So you actually lose weight eating those seeds. But seeds and nuts are fun to eat. And plants are really cool, the way that they distribute their seed dispersal. You know, some stick on the fur of animals, some blow up. They're just really neat.
Okay,
Uh-oh.
I've done it. I found a complete...
There we go. So there we go. Sassafras. Have any of you ever tried sassafras tea? And did you know that you can take the root bark? I have some. Oh, and it smells so good. So we moved a sassafras tree this year from our yard because we were creating another habitat. And we got the roots, and you peel off the bark, and it's bright orange. I don't know if you can see it in my hand, but it smells so good. And you steep this. You boil some water, pour it over, steep for about 5 minutes, and then you drink it. Drink the tea. It's a beautiful orange tea. You can also grind up the leaves, and that is what filet powder is. So in gumbo and a lot of Creole cooking, they use filet powder, and that's a thickener and a flavorer. So you can tell a sassafras tree because it's got 3 shapes of leaves on one tree. There's a ghost, an egg, and a mitten. So this is just 101. I'm not really teaching plant ID right here. I'm just showing you some things that probably grow in your yard already and that you can learn to identify. And if there's a want for more, I am happy to do this program over and over with, like teaching how to identify plants by their leaves and things like that. So sassafras is edible and delicious. Here's the dried leaves. Here's what they look like. And you just crumble these up and then you devein them, you know, get the veins out, and you add it to your gumbo. Your crayfish dish. White pine needles. So white pine needles are high in vitamin C content. That's another cool thing about eating plants that grow naturally in the environment where they are, and they're ripening without any watering, without any chemicals. They're just, you know, of nature, and they are filled with nutrition. They just happen naturally, and they're better for us. They're more nourishing. So to make a white pine tea, you take some needles off your white pine and you boil some water, let them steep for 5 minutes, no longer, and it's this real pale yellow tea that's got a piney flavor that's really delicious and high in vitamin C. I have tried this and I like it a lot. I also heard that you can pour that water into a bathtub and it helps open your sinuses, but whatever you do, don't put the needles in your bathtub too, because that would not be fun. Downy woodmint. So there's lots and lots of wild mints out there. The wild oregano, our oregano comes from a wild plant that was domesticated and, you know, made to be more tender or less spicy. But this is downy woodmint, and this mint right here is wonderful. You take the leaves, you dry them, and then you just steep a tea, make a tea out of them. And it's beautiful, easy to identify. It looks like somebody dusted some white on top of it. And if you pull off the leaves and squish them in your fingers and smell them, they smell so good. They will open your sinuses up right away. While I'm looking at this image, I actually see some other things that are edible. If we look down on the right-hand corner, I see one little Queen Anne's lace. I didn't show that plant in this image because it can be mistaken for poison hemlock, which is extremely poisonous, so poisonous that it can kill you. It will kill if you eat it. So never want to be just out there picking things, you know, haphazardly throwing things in the basket, mixing things up. You want to make sure you're picking very clean and picking the right plant. That's one of the 3 R's, right plant. So Queen Anne's lace, which is in the image, is where carrots came from. It's wild carrot. So if you pull up the first year root in the fall, when all of the yummy starches are down in the root, you can actually eat that little wild carrot. It's really woody though, but if you pulled one up and broke it, you'd smell the wonderful carrot aroma coming from it. I also see another little wild edible in this image. This picture was taken right in the yard here. You see the little tiny clovers right down on the very bottom under the yellow flowers on the bottom of the image? That is called wood sorrel, and wood sorrel is loaded with oxalic acid, which is what's in a green apple, and it's super sour. And I know almost every one of you out there have tried what you called sour grass when you were a kid. So you can actually eat wood sorrel too. Am I running out of time? I get pretty excited, so.
You are just fine, Jenny. It's 11:30, so we got about another 15 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes for questions.
Okay, perfect. Fruits, nuts, and berries. Okay, these are important things. Use your guidebook and make sure that you have 100% positive ID. If there's any question in your mind, don't eat a beautiful red fruit. You know, make sure you're eating the right thing. Many things out there are poisonous, and we need to avoid gathering anything that's poisonous. And like I was saying earlier, pick clean. If you're getting wood sorrel, make sure you're not picking something else with the wood sorrel. Put it in a basket and pick clean. Okay, we'll start with this. It grows in my yard. It's wild. This is called ground cherries. And see the little green, it's like a little basket. Have you ever eaten, maybe you've had tomatillos from the grocery store. They grow in this little sack. Well, the sack turns brown. There's other poisonous plants that have the same sack, and the sack also turns brown, so you want to be really careful. But ground cherries are green inside the little green sack, and when the sack turns brown, the berry also turns yellow and becomes edible, and they are delicious. You can make a wonderful salsa with them. This is a really common one that everybody likes to eat and harvest is black raspberries. The first, well, maybe not the first brambles to ripen. The first ones grow along the ground and in the woods, dewberries, and those are edible too. But the brambles actually hybridize too. But you can tell black raspberries because of the, do you see the stem is actually, it's got a white glaucous coat over it, and it's round, so you can wipe that white glaucous coat off and it'll be purple under there. I have two types of berries in my hand because they were ripening in the same time in my yard. Blackberries were just coming on when the black raspberries were just finishing. So the black raspberries are the smaller ones in my palm, and at my fingers are the blackberries. I prefer black raspberries, and black raspberry stems actually have lots of healing. You can make a tea out of the leaves too. They have lots of healing qualities to them. So you can make a tea out of the dried leaves of black raspberries. They also look like poison ivy if you're not real familiar with plants. Leaves of 3, let it be. It's got 3 leaves. So make sure you're familiar. So I'm showing in this image my berries in the bottom of a basket. This is one of my baskets that my friend Mary Martha made for me. And so I collect in awesome baskets. This is a really cool basket here that my mom got for me at a craft show. It's made out of tulip bark. And it's a basket that Native Americans used, and they hung it around their necks and they collected their fruit in it. So that's another really neat part of harvesting things from the wild, is learning what the natives used and, you know, using some of the cool old stuff from the past. So I like that. I knew a basket maker when I was a girl from Shawnee Forest, and I have some of his baskets. He was such a great basket maker that some of his baskets were displayed in the Smithsonian Institute. His name was Otto Moore, and he's a local man from Shawnee who was alive when I was a girl. Such a cool old man. I knew him when he was a really old man. Okay, wild black cherries come from a tree. Cherry trees are big, giant, beautiful trees, valuable timber trees, and the bark looks like it has black potato chips on it. It looks like black potato chip bark. And I had tried wild black cherries over and over and never found one that I thought was just good enough to eat. I had read that you could make a jelly out of them, and I thought, well, these things are just too pungent for me. And I finally found, for the first time about 4 years ago, some super ripe ones, and they became shiny and black, and they were large, and they were so good. I have lots of black cherries growing in the backyard, and sometimes the tent caterpillars will come in and they'll just cover the trees and defoliate the leaves, and then come the awesome Orioles. The Baltimore Orioles will come in and they'll tear those little caterpillars apart and suck out the juice in the middle. So not only do you get the beautiful wild cherry tree, you get to eat the berries, you get to see the wildlife, the caterpillars that are native, and the Orioles eating the berries.
Hey, Jenny.
Yes.
I'm going to break in just real quick since you were just talking about blackberries a few slides ago. Yep. Danica asked, how much water do you need to grow blackberries?
They grow wild. They grow in the wild. You don't need any water. I have 4 acres of them up here, and they just naturally grow. They like ridges, though. They really do like a lot of sunshine. Most fruits and berries love a lot of sunshine and open space, but they grow in the wild. You don't need anything to grow native plants. They just come up naturally. So that's a really great thing. You don't have to water. You don't have to fertilize. Another reason to use native wild edibles in your landscape. And even if you have a small yard, you kids can make your own little edible plot. Now this is just yesterday. I made some pawpaw bread yesterday. I harvested, actually my friend Dave brought me a 3-gallon bucket full of pawpaws, and some were ripe. The ripe ones are the brown ugly ones, and then the ones that aren't ripe yet are green. And if you look at this image, this is a pawpaw tree, a baby pawpaw tree that's growing up in my flower bed. It's got a very large leaf that you could almost use to fan yourself with. And then the little terminal bud is soft like a paintbrush. And here I am smashing pawpaws, and it's called a custard apple. And custard apples are known for having lots and lots of seeds and a mushy, sweet, delicious fruit. And the fruit of pawpaw is actually a superfood, which means it gives you everything you need, everything, all the minerals and vitamins that you could ever need to nourish your body. So pawpaws are awesome. And it's more fun than slime, girls. If you like making slime, you'll love squishing pawpaws. The bread was fantastic. So there's the pawpaws. Persimmons are also quite delicious and another superfood that grow in the wild right here in Ohio. And these are not ripe yet, but this picture was taken right in the yard again. And when they ripen, it's going to be after the first frost. Usually they'll start falling off the tree when they're ripe. If you eat a persimmon before it's ripe, it's going to turn your mouth inside out. You'll think, oh, why did she tell me to eat that? It's awful. But it's not. They're really good. You just have to wait till the right time. The 3 R's, the right plant, right part, right time. Don't forget. Oh, I love this tree. These are so awesome. Here's one in my hand. This came from my backyard too. These are hazelnuts, and one of our hazelnuts right now has probably 60 pounds of hazelnuts on it. And a lot of people like to squish the nuts and make hazelnut milk. I like to roast them, and I like to eat them. So I have a bunch of hazelnuts from last year, right here. These are hazelnuts from last year. And this is my son asked for Christmas. He said he wanted nutcrackers. So this is a nutcracker that you can use to crack hazelnuts. You just put the hazelnut in there, spin it, you'll hear a little crack, and then you'll get this beautiful nut, and you can eat them raw, or you can roast them. You can make candy with them. You can sprinkle them on top of a pie. Oh, hazelnut chiffon. Forget about it. Here's this hazelnut. Believe me, girls, they're good. And you can preserve them. I mean, these are from last year. If you put your nuts in a cool, dry, dark place, they'll last for years. Pioneers did it. Let's do it now. Let's all do it again. Let's eat from our own space. Shop local in your own backyard. All right, black walnut, another delicious nut. I don't know if you've ever purchased walnuts from the store. They're not black walnuts. They're English walnuts. They're from Europe. Let's eat our own walnuts. This is actually a butternut. I didn't have any walnuts in here, but this is a butternut, which is also like a black walnut, except for it's becoming really rare. So if you find the nuts of a butternut, which are long like a football, make sure you plant one in your backyard. Butternuts need our help. They're declining from the landscape. We need more butternuts. They're delicious too. They're in the pecan family, like the hickories. These are more related to a hickory tree. Now we'll go to some mushrooms, and mushrooms are delicious, but also dangerous. People die from being poisoned by eating wild plants and foods without being properly informed. So it's so important that you use multiple books, cross-reference, take a spore print, find out what poisonous lookalikes there are out there, and learn. Keep learning, and before you try something new, make sure that you do a lot of research. And again, leave some for others. And only cook mushrooms when they're eaten, wild mushrooms. When they're only eat them when they're cooked. That was a tongue twister. This is my friend Sunshine Brosi. She's an ethnobotany professor at Frostburg University, and she loves harvesting morel mushrooms. She was the keynote speaker one time at the Wild Edible Weekend. Ethnobotany is what people use plants for in the past and today. So medicines, foods, all that stuff. And that's what she teaches for a living. So she's a super cool girl. I really like her. So these are morels. Morels are some of the first. Yeah.
Your slideshow. There we go. We're seeing your friend now with the morels. It was just caught. It was caught a minute, but it's up to date now.
Okay, good. Morels are, everybody wants to find morels. I think it's like, you know, I have straight hair, but I want curly hair. We want the things that are the hardest to get or impossible to get. And morels, if you don't have a good spot, they're really hard to find. And everybody knows it has a certain spot and they'll beat you to them every time. So they're really hard to find. We have a mushroom weekend in Shawnee, and so does Cedar Creek. Cedar Creek State Park also hosts a mushroom weekend, I think. So check out our state parks for more information in the future if you're interested in learning more. Now these are called tree ears or old man ears or wood ears. And they grow on, the morels that I just showed grow on the ground. And that's something you need, you know, mushrooms grow in different places. They're awesome decomposers. Some grow on wood, some grow on the ground. So those are like distinguishing characteristics for you to help learn some of those things. These ones are used in a lot of Asian cuisine and soups, and they're a natural blood thinner. So if you're on medicine that thins your blood, you probably should stay away from tree ears. That's something else to always think of. You know, if you're on a medicine where you're supposed to avoid certain foods, like maybe spinach, if you're supposed to avoid spinach, you shouldn't eat things with oxalic acid in them, like the wood sorrel I was telling you about. Maybe this is too complicated. Maybe I'm doing too many details. I don't know, but I just love it all so much. So tree ears are edible, and they're squishy like a slime too. You can squish them in your hands and they feel really cool. So you don't need to waste any glue and waste any Ziploc baggies to make slime. Just go to the forest and find some slimy things and play with those. Chanterelle mushrooms are also highly prized mushrooms that grow around the world and are so delicious, and they grow right in the woods in my backyard. And they have some lookalikes, but they're easy to tell. The chanterelles, the veins don't grow down the stalk, but you can use a mushroom book. I have this one that I love. This is a great mushroom book, but I have many others. I have about 6. So make sure you use your books. This is a wild edible plant that I use. I love the Peterson field guides. They're great. So use your books. This is the one that I was telling you about that I just tried for the first time myself. It's called Ruffles. I've seen it in the woods over and over, and it grows at the base of or where an old oak tree had died. And this was right across the street from me in my own woods. And I found it, and it was very fresh. So I cut it and I cleaned it in a mild salt water, and then I fried it up and ate it, and my whole family enjoyed it. Another name for this one is called cauliflower mushroom, and there's a couple varieties of it. But this one, I think Ruffles makes a good name for it. It looks like Ruffles. Chicken of the woods, highly sought after mushrooms that grow on logs. We just saw this the other day while we were updating some maps there in another park. Where were we, Jenna? Just Thursday.
We were at Dillon.
So these were at Dillon State Park, growing on a log. And you can actually harvest mushrooms in state parks, and you can pick up nuts and you can harvest berries, but that's it. You can never dig plants on public land. It's against the law. So don't do it. Make sure you make your own little flower bed and edible. I actually made my own mushroom bed. I took inoculated with the spores that I bought from the mushroom lady, a business called More Than Morels. She actually sells these little wood pegs that are inoculated with mushroom spores for shiitakes and for oysters. And I bought some of her stuff and made my own little mushroom bed. See, I made a mushroom garden too this year, which has been really fun. And then these are some of the resources that I use, but I have many more. I have a huge library, and the internet is good, but make sure you're at a really, really reliable source. Do not just go to any source and believe what they say. You have to really make sure you're at a reliable source. And Peterson field guides are my all-time favorite. But in this book, they really kind of, you know, they're saying, hey, go out and harvest. I think you need to be really, really careful about where you harvest, how much you harvest, and always remember it's best if you're on your own land or a friend's land, your grandparents' land, and not on public land. I was saying we have about 5% of the land in Ohio is public land, which is parks and forests. And although we can take some stuff from those places, those are the places where the wildlife are thriving, and they need that space for their grocery store. So I think we should leave those spaces for them. Personally, I feel that way. But I have some other cool stuff that my dad makes maple syrup. This is my dad's beautiful maple syrup. He taps trees in February, and maple trees, the sap runs out. He boils it down. It turns to syrup. About 50 gallons makes one gallon of syrup. Oh, this is something that came from my yard. I started raising honeybees about a year ago because I wanted to see what it was like to have honeybees, because I want an observation hive in Shawnee. So I started raising honeybees here, and I got my first honey. That's wild and edible. Without all the flowers and plants in my yard, my bees would have never been able to produce this beautiful honey for me. These are wild grapes. There's 4 varieties of wild grapes that grow down here, and these are preserved wild grapes that you can throw in a salad or just eat them, pop them in your mouth. I have blackberry preserves from all the piles of blackberries I harvested this year. My dad made me preserves, and some sumac elderberry jelly. So there's just tons of things you can do with plants in your yard, and I encourage you. It's a bonding experience with family members. It's knowing where your food came from and knowing that it didn't have to get on an airplane and fly over here, or a big bus or a train or a barge. It came right from your own yard. And it's when things are hand-picked, there's something that really connects you. And when you learn about the plants and animals that are in your yard that you can use to consume, to nourish your body and give thanks back to those plants and animals, it's just a really special feeling. So I encourage it.
Okay,
especially
Jenny,
if you're going to do your yard.
We've got 4 minutes left, so we're going to do some rapid fire questions, okay?
All right. Yeah.
Are hedge apples edible?
No, but I hear that they keep spiders away if you bring the apple in your yard.
So no. How many different edible plants are there?
Over 1,000.
Right, and a lot of that's going to depend on where you live.
Yes, and the habitat where you live.
Okay, so are weeds a problem in your yard of edible plants? Do they grow on their own well, or are you weeding a lot?
Weeds, I eat the weeds. I eat lamb's quarter, I eat purslane, I eat all the weeds. I don't pull the weeds up because a lot of the weeds are edible. So why fight and pull the weeds? Eat the weeds. If you can't beat them, eat them. Learn the weeds you can eat.
That is a great slogan, Jenny. How many different edible plants do you have in your yard?
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. I have no idea. There's so many. I can look out any window and I can see things that I can eat. And now that I'm so connected, I've been studying these plants my whole life. I can look anywhere and find edible plants. I know, because I am so connected to the earth and all that it provides for us.
What's some of your favorites?
My favorites? I love daylily buds. I really love eating invasive species. I really do. Autumn olive berries are so good. You can make a fruit leather out of them. It's an extremely invasive plant, so I like eating invasive things. Of course, my dad's maple syrup is my ultimate favorite.
Okay, Jenny, do you have a favorite? If somebody asked you what mushroom guide they should start with, what's your favorite mushroom guide?
I love this guy right here. I love Walt. He's a really cool guy. Mushrooms of the Northeast. I like this book a whole lot, but Peterson's field guides are ultimately like the best. Peterson's field guides are great because Roger Torrey Peterson came up with this awesome idea long ago to put a little arrow right next to distinguishing characteristics, which means this has a, poisonous lookalike. I'm going to point to the thing that tells you this is poisonous. So his mushroom book is great because he uses that little arrow that, sets that plant aside from another. Okay. No other books have that.
We're going to try to squeeze in one more question here. Josie said, my mom said they used to chew on something called Indian gum when they were young. What plant would that have been? She said it was a tendril that came from a vine.
Oh, well, there's a lot of cool tendrils that come from vines that are edible, but I'm thinking of greenbrier right now. Greenbrier, when it's soft and growing in the spring, you can pop the top right off. It's this thorny plant that rips rips your pants when you walk through it. But in the spring, you can rip the tops off and they're little tendrils. You can eat them. You can also eat grapes and parts of the grape leaves, and they have tendrils that grow up trees. So it could have been wild grape or it could have been greenbrier.
All right, we're going to do one last question here from Eliana, who wants to know, how do you start an edible bed at your house?
You look at the plants that grow in your area naturally. And this book, Edible Wild Plants, has those list of habitats. So if you live in a wooded area, look at the plants that naturally grow where you live and then just use those plants that are edible. Pawpaw would be great to plant. I have pawpaw trees. Persimmons would be great. Planting a tree, everyone should plant a tree for the rest of their lives too. Just plant trees. Trees are good, especially edible.
That is all we have time for. I'm going to throw one more in. Somebody asked if you could eat kudzu. Yes, you can.
And it's an invasive.
Right. Which plant is the healthiest? From Claire, that's just going to depend because they all have different vitamins and nutrients in them. And then Riley asked, are all fruits edible? No, Riley, they are not. Some are going to be edible and some aren't. So as Jenny's been saying, it's just really important that you know your area and that you are positive about your identification before you eat anything. Thank you all so much. Jenny, thank you. You are, as always, just a fountain of wisdom. I put a link for Shawnee State Park in the published area. So if you girls want to know where you can find Jenny, you can find her there at Shawnee. Thank you so much for joining us. We are moving on in about 10 minutes to Central Ohio, outside of Mansfield, and we're going to visit Malabar Farm State Park. So come back and join us for that. Thank you all so much. Bye.
Thank you.